If I was on my deathbed and I look back on my life, I don't want to have this regret, or I don't want to be like, oh, I could have done that. I want to live a life of purpose, a life of intentionality, and I want to create some sort of legacy.
So it's my pleasure to invite Ziyaan Virji.
But in Kenya, one 17-year-old boy.
This is Ziyaan's story.
To date, we've been able to help 17,000 people, 10 countries around the world, raise over hundreds of thousands of dollars. I had never seen something like this coming in my life, and losing 3 weeks of my life and hearing all these stories like made me realize that shit, like our time like on this planet is very limited, right? And like I'm so grateful for, obviously, like we dated for like 1 year, and that was probably like one of the best things that has happened to me. Moving forward, I lost control of my life for 3 weeks. Moving forward, I want to be in 100% control of everything that I do moving forward. Like, what if I lost my life? Or what if, like, I never got out of this weird state that I was in? Like, what if? Going very back into my background and who I am and where it all started, I can probably think of, I guess, growing up. So, as most of you know, I'm from Tanzania, born and raised there. And my family background, I think, really shaped my values and the person that I've become today. So I think thinking about and learning about my parents' story from a very early age, we came from a middle-class family. My parents immigrated to Tanzania, and both my parents worked. And growing up, I wouldn't say it's hard, but I'd say because of the way I saw my parents work so hard and really coming into a new country and trying to build a life for their kids and give everything. Like, my mom wanted to pursue education because she got married so early, but she could never really pursue she wanted to do an ACCA at the time. She wanted to become a chartered accountant, but she couldn't do that because she had to go straight into work so that she could support my dad, and help us with our education, and make sure that we get the best of education possible for us at the time. So growing up, a lot of the times it was before my brother left from like grade 1 to 7. It was mostly just my brother and I, like, at home, and we had to sort of like grow up with each other. My parents were at work and they would come really late. And I think thinking about that, I slowly started like valuing some of the things that a lot of people take for granted in life, like going to school, family, the value of money, and the privileges people have and people don't have. And I think that really shaped me. And a story I can think of is when we were young, like going to school, a lot of our parents gave us very little pocket money, and a lot of our friends were more wealthier than us, so they would get a lot of pocket money. And at that time, that was such a big deal. And my parents would pack us food to go to school, but we felt so embarrassed to take that food because we were like, yo, like, I want to buy food from the canteen. Like, I don't want to eat like this Indian food that my mom packed for me, you know what I mean? So my brother and I thought about like being creative with it, and we're like, how do we get more pocket money from our parents? So we set up this deal with my parents in which we used to take the school bus. But instead of, my brother and I were like, how about we tell our parents, like, instead of giving us the money instead of paying for the school bus, how about you give us that money and we'll get more pocket money and we'll be able to then, I guess, have like a meal at school or whatever, you know what I mean? And yeah, like simple stories like that, I feel like really, really shaped me and understanding like, okay, what, like, where am I at in this world? What is the value of working hard? What is the value of like money and giving back, and coming to the story of like, of why in my journey I've always thought about social impact. I think so. I mentioned this to all of you guys before, but I'm an Ismaili Muslim, and one of the really strong pillars in our faith, I'm very religious, is service and giving back. And so from a very early age, I was very involved in my community, and in volunteering. So everything from like orphanage visits like every other weekend to like hospitals to working with elders in the community. Like I'll go to the mosque every day, so I was a volunteer there. And the people at the time, I can think of like I'm gonna say their names because I want to shout them out, but there was like Nadir and Miss Alicia at the time, and I was very young, and they would really encourage me to like be part in the community and volunteer and do small things like, you know, getting water for the elders or arranging the shoes at the mosque or like simple things like that. And I feel like that really um, those experiences at that very early age, at that time, I was mostly doing it because like all my friends were part of it and that was my community. But I feel like going through those experiences really shaped those values that I still have today of giving back, of service, and the importance of it, and thinking about a purpose in life. And then I guess in terms of what I was like in school before I moved to boarding school, my parents were like typical Indian parents. They really pushed both my brother and I to like do well in school. And so especially like in our primary years, like from grade 1 to 6, we would pretty much do like every extracurricular activities like in school. Parents would really push us to like get good grades and stuff, and I would never do my homework, and I would always like be like, I'm gonna like give it in tomorrow, and she would always say like tomorrow never comes. And that's something that still stuck with me until today, and hence why this podcast as well, why it's called Leaders of Today, because it's this idea that if there's something that you want to do in life, or there's something that you want to accomplish, or there's something that you're passionate about, you don't have to wait until tomorrow to start it, because tomorrow never comes, right? And I think that's something that I have really stuck with me, and this mindset from a very early age of like, if you want to achieve something in life, like you can start today, and hence why Leaders of Today, the name of the podcast. So yeah, that's some of my earlier memories. And a lot growing up, I had really good friends at the time. Again, and I'm not friends with them anymore, but because of like a lot of shit that went down. But I think that sense of community and those friends that I had growing up, and doing stuff like volunteering, um, my religious community, my family. My brother would always have this. That's his favorite quote. It's his like WhatsApp status and Instagram bio up to today. But he's had this since like growing up. I would always see it. He would put posters of it everywhere, and it's this idea of you have to be odd to be number one. And I would see that all the time, but I never really meant what it is. But now that I look back, like my whole journey has literally been being the odd person in my community, in the work that I've done, doing this podcast. Like if I look at the people around me, like no one's doing this. Everyone's taking very conventional paths of like, you know, getting a job, or like doing like in solder, doing like finance and accounting. No one's really pursued like creativity or nonprofit in school, you know what I mean? So I feel like my brother, and it's actually his birthday today. So when we were filming it, it's his birthday. But yeah, I feel like that's his story, and he's someone I've always looked up to. He was always that big role model I had at home. I would always hang out with his friends. I would always like, you know, I'd see him like win awards and do like cool stuff, and he's had his own like path and struggles. But for me, like he's someone I've always looked up to, and I've always wanted to be like him. So yeah, that idea of you have to be out to be number one, like that's something that I still talk to. And he also has a tattoo of it, so that's how obsessed he is with it. But anyways, this episode has only been possible through the support of Optimal Living. They're on a mission to make every person feel like home. In my journey, they've made Canada feel like home through their support by not only giving me my first job here, but by ensuring that this episode has come to life. Thank you so much to the Optimal Living family. And moving to the school, the Akan Academy Mombasa, it was life changing. In the sense that, you know, I for the first time in my life, I was in a place where I was more intentional. I was around people that would really push me. There was this really competitive nature at the school, because in sort of my middle years, I was losing that passion and ambition to like do what I want. I wouldn't care about school. I never do my homework. Like I was sort of losing that. So it was really good timing for me to move to that school. And then eventually I did move there in my first year. I did find it difficult, again, moving to a new country, making new friends, boarding school. Like, I love my parents, so being away from them, like, was weird. And I was only like 15 at the time, so it did take me a while to adjust. Um, and actually, so on the last day of my first year, there's a dengue fever outbreak, and all everyone on my floor got it apart from me, and I was like chatting shit. I'm like, yeah, I didn't get it. All of you guys got it, and obviously karma is a thing. So I ended up getting it, and the last day of school was full of like assemblies and stuff, and I remember like feeling really sick. My head was hurting. I had a really bad fever, um, and um, yeah, it was just pretty bad. And I went to my dorm parents' office, and I was like, "Yo, I can't sit in these assemblies. Can I just like sleep at your be in your office until the assemblies are over?" And he's like, "Yeah." So I sat there and I just fell asleep because I was so weak and stuff. And then he woke me up for lunch, and he's like, "Yo, you don't look all right. Like, you should go see the nurse." So I went to the nurse, and she told me I can't give you any medication until like you have something to eat. So I go have lunch. I come back, and then she wasn't there. Like, she was having lunch, and I was so weak and like exhausted. I'm like, I can't even sit here like waiting for her. So I'm just gonna go to my room, and I'm gonna like sleep and then come back in the evening for meds. I go to my room, and I fall asleep until midnight. And keep in mind, I'm leaving the next day to go back to Tanzania, taking a 5 a.m. bus in the morning. So I hadn't packed, I hadn't done anything. It's the end of the year. I have to take everything back with me because it was like summer break, right? So I was so sick, like I fell asleep until midnight, and then one of my friends wakes me up and he's like, "Yo, you haven't packed, you're sick, like, and we're leaving in 5 hours. You need to fix up." So in all that weakness and how bad I was feeling, I somehow managed to pack everything. Got on the bus to go back to Tanzania, and um, I slept the whole 12-hour bus ride because I was so weak. And no one knew like what was happening at the time. Like, my dorm parent was like, he was sick, but like I don't know if he left, like what's wrong. My parents were worried. They're like, what's happening? Because I wouldn't like reply to the phone because I was asleep. And then right when I get down the bus, like I was so bad that we didn't even go home. Like, we went straight to the hospital because I was just really sick. And what dengue fever does is it kills your platelets, and your platelets are what makes your white blood cells. So when you get dengue fever, like if your platelet count goes very low, you can basically you can your organs can start bleeding because there's nothing to protect your body. So it took doctors 1 week to figure out there was dengue fever, and we kept going from hospital to hospital. And obviously, our healthcare system isn't the best. So eventually, they did figure out that I had dengue fever, and they admitted me to the hospital. And they were like, if we waited any longer, like, it would have been pretty bad. Like, your organs would have been gone. And so I was admitted in the hospital for 1 week. And it was really weird, but because even when I was in the hospital, like my brain was like acting up. Like I was hallucinating a little bit at the time. I was very like drowsy, and like it was just a very weird experience. Like even being in the hospital for a week. But eventually I do recover, and they discharge me. And from the point of getting discharged up to the next 3 weeks, I don't remember anything, but from the stories that people told me, I was basically acting hypersexual and hyperactive for a period of 3 weeks, and I had no control over myself. So, I was doing everything from like singing and dancing and shouting in the mosque to like randomly going up to people and hugging them, to doing some really like crazy things. Like, we went to a doctor when I was in this phase, and they asked me, what do I want to be when I grow up? And they're like, I want to become a porn star or some shit. Like, I was that messed in the head. And I did some really crazy things that I don't think are appropriate to share, but I didn't really have any control over myself. And 3 weeks later, I wake up on my bed and I check my phone. I see the date, because like on your home screen, you see the date. And the last thing I remembered was 3 weeks before that getting discharged from the hospital. And I'm like, why is my phone acting up? Like, is my calendar wrong? Like what's happening right now? And I was so lost and I was so confused. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, and then I obviously called my parents. And I was like, in the meantime, checking my social media. And I was like, something's not adding up. Like, everything looks so different. Like, where's like why is the timings not aligning, right? And then my parents rush home and they tell me like, yeah, like you were basically acting stupid and crazy and like hypersexual, hyperactive for 3 weeks. And their first reaction was they were relieved that I'm in my senses and I'm trying to make sense of things. So I was so confused. I started crying when they started telling me all these stories because I couldn't believe like these were some of the things that I did. And it took me around 1 to 2 weeks to fully figure out what was the difference between, because I kept feeling like I was in my dreams. Like when when they were describing some of the stuff, I had glimpses of it, and the glimpses were like how you have glimpses of your dreams. And I was like, what the hell is happening right now? So I kept like touching stuff to be like, is this real? Is this a dream? Like, I don't know, am I tripping right now? And because they gave me a lot of medication to control me, like I was shivering. I couldn't sleep at night, like, and those 1 to 2 weeks were really hard because I was so confused and I couldn't understand like what is life. Um, Anyways, eventually I do fully recover and I'm starting to make sense of things. And the thing is, everyone had a different theory about it. So the people that treated me for dengue fever were like, that may have affected your brain functionality because that's something that happens. Went to a psychologist. She misdiagnosed me at the time for bipolar disorder, and she said I went through a manic episode. We went to spiritual like priests, and because my parents are very religious and spiritual, and they thought I was possessed, and they would do all these different like weird like chants and give me all these random like things to drink, and it was weird. And then we went, and because my parents were trying to figure every possible solution to help me out of this situation, right? Um, we went to a Reiki master, and she said like a negative entity passed through me, and my chakra for like sex and stuff was misaligned. Because you have like 7 chakras. So everyone had a different theory, and I didn't know what to believe. But now that I look back, and as I think about that story, um, my biggest learning out of that, or my biggest like thought process was like, okay, everyone has a different theory. I just went to this really weird ass out of body experience or whatever you can call it. Um, what next, right? And I felt like I had never seen something like this coming in my life, and losing 3 weeks of my life, and hearing all these stories like made me realize that shit, like our time like on this planet is very limited, right? And like, what if I lost my life, or what if like I never got out of this weird state that I was in? Like, what if, right? And so I sort of took it as like some sort of wake up call, and some sort of like um turning point, in the sense that I was like, shit, like moving forward, I lost control of my life for 3 weeks. Moving forward, I want to be in 100% control of everything that I do moving forward. And crazy enough, everything that happened after that just aligned so well, that yeah, like the rest is sort of history, and I'll share more about that in the next segment. I hope you are as inspired as I was through this conversation. If you'd like to follow our journey and learn more about some of the other guests, I encourage all of you to follow us on all social media platforms at Leaders of Today Pod. We hope to continue bringing these conversations to life, and hope you're able to take something away from this. So obviously we're talking about the story of how I went through this experience, and I mentioned that everything that happened after this sort of aligned in a way. Now that I look back, it just doesn't make like there's no logical sense of how everything just made sense after everything that happened, in the sense that, so my parents, after going through this experience, didn't want to send me back to boarding school, because they were like, what if this happens again? Like, who's going to take care of you? Luckily, it all happened during the summer. Um, but I somehow convinced them that I'm gonna go back. Like all my friends, like I've settled there, like whatever. So we go back to school, and um, because I had this thing at the back of my head that I want to live a life more intentionally, and I want to, get my shit together, sort of. I so in terms of, there was someone that I liked at the time, and right after this, like that's my second girlfriend, but I got with her right after this experience, and like I'm so grateful for her. Obviously, like we dated for like 1 year, and that was probably like the best, like one of the best things that has happened to me. Um, so that, like in terms of my like relationship or love life, like that was something that aligned. And then in school, I started doing like I didn't have good grades in my first year at boarding school, but right after that, we used to have this honor system where like if you get past a certain mark, like you're awarded, and it's like a whole thing. So right after this thing happened, after my second year, I started being on the honor list, and my grades started becoming better, and I was working really hard. I managed to change my friend group at the time, and start surrounding myself with like better friends and people that actually wanted the best for me. And I went through a whole phase where I like had to cut people out and stuff. So that's something that aligned. And then obviously the big nonprofit. Right when I go back to school, I'm required to start up this personal project, and I could do anything of my choice. And everyone in the cohort had to do this project. And that is when I watched this documentary on Al Jazeera named India's Menstruation Man. First time learning about periods, first time learning about menstruation. I was never the kind of kid that really cared about like social issues or anything. Like, I was like, yo, like that's weird, man. Like, who talks like you're a guy? Like, don't talk about periods and shit. You know what I mean? But I watched this documentary, and I'm like, yo, like this is interesting. Like, why is no one talking about this? And I have a conversation with my mom about it, and she tells me that when she was younger, and she grew up in India, she grew up in a single parent household. So they struggled financially a lot when they were growing up, and there were points in in her life where she didn't have access to products. So she would use old rags, cloth, like blankets when she got a period, and it was very unsanitary, very uncomfortable. She told me all these stories about how there were moments where she would leak in school and stuff, and her friends would have to like help her out. So I'm like, damn, like I watched this documentary. My mom tells me this story. Like I want to do something about this. So I go through this whole journey of like researching and checking out all these different products. I learned how to stitch with a tailor, and I was able to design my first product that would last for 6 months and help 22 people in Moshi, Tanzania, which is where I'm from. Or Tanzania is where I'm from, but a city called Moshi. And that marked the end of my school project. Um, I was able to help 22 people. I presented about it, got really good feedback. And when everyone was making their presentations, like my presentation wasn't the best. Like I never got like, I guess the best of grades. Like usually we had like this whole exhibition, and all the other people were like being like, yo, your project is way better than this other kid. Anyways, no one really paid attention to me. And I was like, okay, cool, whatever. Because I knew I did this project because I actually wanted to help versus doing the best project, if that makes sense. Anyways, we got feedback from these 22 people, and I realized that I actually contributed more to the problem than solving it. And what this means is that after the 22 people, after the 6 months that my product will last for those 22 people, they would go back to the same old methods that they had. And in reality, I just created like a dependency syndrome where they keep depending on someone else to come and help them. And I didn't really solve this issue. So that was the first realization I had. Secondly, I realized like the product that I made, they weren't like, some of the people that I worked with, they didn't even have pairs of underwear. How are they even gonna wear this like reusable pad that I made? I realized the colors that I used, it was white, so the blood stains were so evident, and you have to wash these. So like they would feel really embarrassed when they wash it and put it out in the open. So I had all these realizations, and also realized this is something I want to continue working on. So I go back to school, start up a small team. We're around 7 to 10 people at the time, and we changed two main things. One, we changed our product. So we collaborated with a group of women with disabilities that knew how to stitch. And with them, we were able to come up with this product that will now last for 3 years, 100% biodegradable, extremely cost effective, and embarrassment free. It would also come with all these different things that I talked about, such as pairs of underwear, antiseptic soap, a waterproof bag, and all these different items. And we'd also change the design so that we use like darker colors so you can't see the blood stains. It's embarrassment free in that sense. And then what we also change is we change our approach. So now when working with groups, instead of just simply going to a group and giving them products and be like, okay, thank you very much. Like, see you. I hope we've helped you, and take a bunch of pictures. Like, now we actually take time to understand their needs, build a relationship with them. We're able to, we have this sustainable model for approach in which we'll initially go in there, do a needs assessment, build a relationship, and then after that, we would um, we would have an educational workshop where we teach both boys and girls, menstruators and non-menstruators, about reproductive and sexual health, because it's usually not part of their school curriculum. And then after that, we'll introduce our product. We'll be like, these are reusables. These are what your other options are, and talk about like other types of products. And we'll teach them how to use and wash our reusable. But what we'll also do is we'll teach them how to make their own. Now, the good thing about this is after the 3 years that it lasts, we're providing them a skill. It's this whole idea of don't give them fish, but teach them how to fish, right? So since we're giving them the skill after the 3 years and we use locally available materials, they can now have lifelong access to this product and never depend on anyone else to give this to them. You know what I mean? And the good thing is also that if there's there's an exponential effect. So if there's a group of 1,000 and we go in there and just help like 10 menstruators, those 10 then pass on that skill to 10 others, and those 10 pass on to 10 others. So eventually, we're able to help a whole community of 1,000 and really empower them, and have that long lasting impact. So we did change that. And whilst I was doing all of this, I was documenting on my social media. I was talking about it, and organically it just kind of grew, like a lot of people would see it. And we, I mean, to date, we've been able to help 17,000 people, 10 countries around the world, raise over hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I guess a really big year as part of that was in 2019 when I was able to win the Diana Award, one of the most prestigious awards. I was able to be featured on like BBC. I was getting a lot of like recognition for the work I was doing. I got to travel to New York for like a summit and travel to Dubai to speak about my journey. And I was really able to get all that recognition and see why is it that I'm making that impact and grow. Fast forward, 2020, obviously COVID hits. And at the time, we had only helped, I think pre-COVID, around 500 people. But COVID hit, and I realized that I was spending a lot of time talking about the work that I was doing versus actually doing the actual work. And when COVID hit, I realized like, yo, like I'm doing this all wrong. And I got so caught up in, the fame and the clout and doing PR and all of this recognition that I was sort of losing why is it that I'm actually doing what I'm doing. So in COVID, I reconnected with that, and we really pushed the impact that we had. So pre-COVID, we were around 500 people. 2020, we did 8,500. 2021 to now, we're at 17,000 and only growing. So we're really able to expand in terms of impact, and I've really connected with that. And I made that intentional effort to spend more time on the actual work on ground. Obviously, over the years, through the work that I was doing, I've had a lot of other opportunities, like worked in the climate space, in the education space, poverty, and so forth. And throughout this journey, if there's something that I can think about, is that story and that experience that I went through earlier, that, why is it that I'm doing all of this, right? And it's that idea of like, if I was on my deathbed and I look back on my life, I don't want to have this regret, or I don't want to be like, oh, I could have done that. I want to live a life of purpose, a life of intentionality, and I want to create some sort of legacy. And what that legacy for me is, and all I can think about, is that impact that I can have on other people. So be it through this conversation, or be it through the nonprofit or the other projects that I worked on, I'm always thinking about how is it in my day-to-day interactions I can have an impact on someone's life. And I think that's something I encourage everyone to think about. It's very hard, obviously, as a 20-year-old watching this, like, to have these difficult conversations with yourself. But that's something we should all have. Like, who knows if tomorrow is ever going to come? And that's the reason why I want to have this podcast, is how do we have these conversations? How do we create a space for anyone that's watching to be like, okay, all these different guests have had their path and started so young and have done what they've done. If they can do it, why can't I do it? You know what I mean? If I look at 15-year-old Ziyaan when I was just starting off, I just wish someone told me that, you know what, you're not in this alone, and people have gone through this path, and you can look up, and I wish I would listen to these conversations to keep me pushing through those tough days. So that's the reason why I guess I started this show. I want to inspire any person that's watching, no matter what age they are, no matter what their background is, no matter what their financial status is or what country they're from. If you have an idea or if you have a passion and is this something that you want to pursue, no matter what field it is, like arts, sports, music, business, whatever activism, like if you have something, what I want you to take away from this conversation is that you can make an impact and you can really achieve what you want to achieve. And nothing should stop you. Don't wait until tomorrow, as my grade 3 teachers say, tomorrow never comes. Start today. And as young people, we're not only leaders of tomorrow, but we're leaders of today. Thank you very much. Just a quick one. If you see value in this conversation, I want to take this further and introduce you our weekly newsletter. The goal of the newsletter is to provide resources, opportunities, and show you guys some of the behind the scenes stuff that we have. So if this is of your interest and you want to gain more value from the podcast, I recommend using the link in the description to subscribe to our newsletter. Thank you.